Hello, I'm Phil from the Society for the Environment and welcome to this month's EnvCast episode. A very special episode because I'm not sat in my spare bedroom chatting to someone on a screen. I'm actually sitting opposite someone, which is our guest today, on a farm in the middle of the Leicestershire countryside.
Yep.
Pretty close to Warwickshire, that's why I thought I'd ask, make sure. If you don't believe me, check out the YouTube version of this episode. It's all true and it makes me very happy to be outside. Very different surroundings. Our special guest today gained their Chartered Environmentalist registration in recent months via the membership of the Institute of Agricultural Management, and as recently as yesterday they won an award at the 2023 CEnv Awards, which we have on the table right here. So I'm very pleased to welcome Will Oliver to EnvCast. Thank you very much for joining us today and allowing us to be on your farm.
Not a problem at all.
Thanks for it. Nice to be here. It's very nice to be here. As always on EnvCast, I'm going to start proceedings by handing over to our guest to give us a bit of a flavour of what you currently do in your job. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Will Oliver. I'm an arable farmer from Leicestershire, Warwickshire, like you said. Came home to the family business after graduating from Chartered Environmentalist in 2011. We were very much an all arable, high input, high output system. We diversified a little bit into self-store, units and commercial lettings, but it was very clear that we needed to diversify further. So we've gone into, in recent years, we've gone into glamping. We've got poultry now, which works really well with the arable system that we've got. We've also got a storage company. We rent out fishing lakes. We've got a quarry that we rent out. So we've got lots of things going on, and it just helps to spread that risk. So in my day-to-day job really is with the family is to manage all that. So we manage everything in-house. We very rarely use agents and things like that. So that's why I like to really work on my CPD and just progress my knowledge and my contacts in the industry. So yeah, generally I'm probably a bit of a farm manager, but a master of, I do a lot of things. I'm not very good at any of them, but I do them all okay.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
That's the one.
But you are a chartered environmentalist, so you've got a lot of knowledge when it comes to the environmental aspects of your work, which is good to see. So that your job that you've just mentioned explains where we are, which is always useful. So this is, you say it's family farm?
Family farm, I'm fourth generation. Yeah. Okay. So where we're actually sat, we bought in 2011. The main farm is about 10 miles from here in a village of Upton.
Ah, I see. Okay. Interesting. So you are, so I'm told a lot that agriculture is massively important to the environment, which is true. Yet you are the only chartered environmentalist on our register of nearly 8,000 chartered environmentalists that calls himself a farmer. Well, why do you think that is?
First answer is maybe it's awareness of it. I'm not sure, but also I would probably hazard a guess there are farmers who are chartered environmentalists, but they might label themselves differently. They might label themselves as an estate manager or farm manager. I'm sure there is links with agriculture, but certainly I think we need to be doing more as an industry to build that bridge between agriculture and the environment, because we are custodians of the land. Like I say, we're fourth generation. I want this farm to be here and I want it to be in a better place than it is for future generations. And I think the environment is absolutely paramount to that.
I think you're probably right when it comes to whether agricultural professionals call themselves farmers or I guess some of them might be the agents that you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Who are linked to agriculture, yeah.
Do a lot of farmers use those agents rather than having that expertise in-house?
Yes. And a lot of people are probably scared to put themselves out of their comfort zone, whereas I quite like to put myself out of a comfort zone, and generally some things are easier than you may possibly think they are, and you might pay someone a lot of money to do it. I'm not saying some things aren't. Sometimes you have to get people in, but sometimes you've just got to put yourself out of your comfort zone and you'll be surprised. I
take it there's a couple of things that haven't worked as well.
Yeah, we make mistakes. So.
It's all part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're not only the only chartered environmentalist farmer, but you're also an award-winning chartered environmentalist farmer, not just the Society for the Environment Awards. I haven't got the other ones listed, but at our annual awards yesterday, you won the 2023 Registrant Newcomer of the Year award, which celebrates those who have really hit the ground running since recently achieving an environmental professional registration. What went through your mind when your name was announced?
It was just shock, really. I wasn't expecting it.
No?
So it was like, I'm not going to win this. I'm out of my depth. And then suddenly the words that they said, I was like, hang on, this could be me. And then when they mentioned agriculture, because I wasn't aware of what other people's links were with agriculture directly, and I thought, this could be me, actually. I think I've won. So, and then, over the moon.
Well, it's fair to say that there's quite a variety of jobs and disciplines and areas of expertise when it comes to the Society for the Environment's registrant base, so Chartered Environmentalists and RFPs and RFTechs. So for someone who directly works in agriculture, that's got to be seen as pretty useful for the agricultural sector to look at and think,
yeah, and
I might do my bit, maybe.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people might think, Chartered Environmentalist. Well, I had a message yesterday, actually, from someone who wants to do a lot of work with sustainable agriculture, and he messaged saying, what's this Chartered Environmentalist? Like, how do I get into that? And I've had quite a few people mention that. So it does build awareness of it, and then suddenly that will help the credibility that comes with it, I hope.
Yeah. Did you find out about the CEnv registration through your membership with Institute of Agricultural Management? I see. So let's talk about the farm, because you said it's grown. Yeah. Because you were based, we say, in Upton, were you?
Yeah. So we've grown about 1,000 acres in the last 10 years. So.
Okay. What does that mean for the whole farm? What acreage are we talking?
2,000 acres.
2,000 acres. And for someone who doesn't know much about agriculture, how does that? So you're arable, right?
Yeah, we're predominantly arable. We were historically beef and dairy in the past, like before I came home. But now we are predominantly arable. Like we said, we've got a broiler unit, which is poultry, so we get the muck from that to use as fertiliser. And then we've got lots of other little businesses going on in the background, which are all equally as important as each other. Yeah. But yeah, that's what we're doing. Really.
So you're essentially producing your own fertiliser?
Yes. Okay. And we can grow wheat to feed the chickens as well. So.
I see. Which I believe on Jeremy Clarkson's farm, he was doing a relatively similar thing with his chicken?
Yeah, ours is a bit more commercial scale.
Well, it might be, yeah.
But it's still... So commercial poultry, there's a negative stigma to that, but actually... We've got 250 kilowatts of solar panels. We're heating the sheds with ground source heat pumps. It's really efficient. People want food, cheap food, and that's what farmers do. Essentially, we've got to provide what the consumer wants, and that's what we're doing.
Has the recent change in the economy, essentially, and people's spending habits, has that changed you as a farmer?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the whole economy situation is having an effect on everybody. Yeah. Farmers appreciate that food prices, if they went up too much, people would have an issue with that, affordability-wise. But at the same time, our prices have gone up, and sometimes it feels like we don't get that back. And the supermarkets or the middlemen or whoever it may be is probably taking a big chunk of that cut. But like ag inflation or agflation, whatever you want to call it, has gone up 35% in some cases with some of our costs. Right. Fertiliser's doubled in some cases. So, yeah, if our costs are doubling, it's quite scary.
That's pretty extreme, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about Jeremy Clarkson again, but I will do this time because he's publicised it pretty well with things like fertiliser costs and that kind of thing. Is it a worrying time if that continues to rise? Is it starting to stabilise or?
It is. Volatility is never good for anybody. No. If we know these prices before, when we used to discuss our electricity contracts, for example, it was barely even a conversation. It was if you made the wrong decision, you were wrong by 10 or 20 quid sort of thing. Whereas now, if you make the wrong decision, if you make a couple of wrong decisions, it can be absolutely catastrophic to your business.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move away from doom and gloom of financial situations. You mentioned a few things about things like solar panels on the farm, that kind of thing. So clearly, you're a farmer, right? So, but you're also a chartered environmentalist, which fits into that quite well. What does a chartered environmentalist farmer do day to day?
So we have a small team of staff. I have to manage them. So I've got Paul, who's our main farm worker. And he is
that him?
No, that's not him. He's been with us for 35 years. So, and then we've got George, who's been with us for 5 years, and they make my life very easy. Communication's key, but yeah, they really, really good. So man management is really important, and it is with any business. When you're dealing with people, man management is key. So I've done a lot of training on that side of things. And then generally I do all the agronomy on the farm, so that takes up a lot of my time. So I'm field walking, getting prices for inputs, doing things for the soil, trying to learn as much as I possibly can about the soil, as well as simple tasks such as reading meters of the tenants that we've got. So we've got solar panels on some industrial units where we sell the electric to the tenants, and then we've also got a spring, so they're using water from the spring. So everything always comes back to the environment at the end of the day, but it's just baby steps. Sometimes these things are baby steps, and it's like the net zero thing that's going on at the minute. That's in the front of everyone's mind, but I actually think being net zero is push that to the back. It's about being efficient, and if we become more efficient, then net zero is a byproduct of that. And that's what I think that we need to be focusing on at the minute.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. There's a lot of efficiency stuff out there that can just be easily tapped into, but if you put net zero on it, it becomes a really complicated thing.
Well, there was a slide yesterday which was really good, and I'll try and describe it, of the ladders, and it was basically, I can't remember the exact words, but it's basically, if you put a net zero line, you're struggling to reach that line and you can't quite get to it. But if you put reduce the amount of plastic usage within our business, that's one step. Reduce our energy usage, that's the next step. And then before you know it, you're up that ladder way higher than you would have been if you just try to reach that net zero one. So I thought that was a really good slide. Yeah.
Was that on the Society of Environmental Awards and Lectures?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. There's a hint for everyone to have a look at that. It isn't online yet, but it will do. And by the time this goes out, we'll put a link on the description of the podcast, and you'll be able to have a look at the presentation on there. So that was all about plastic packaging, plastic waste and that kind of thing, but it moved on to things like how that fits into net zero, that kind of thing. One of the things you mentioned just then I thought was very interesting, which also is part of the barriers to net zero and that kind of thing, is people think it costs money. But now obviously putting solar panels on your roof costs money, but you said that you are then essentially producing that energy for your tenants, who then pay you for that energy. So that's got to be a useful way of turning things around. Yeah,
and it doesn't take someone in the press to say we need to be net zero by 2040. I agree with what they're saying to focus the mind, but when electricity prices get as high as 60p a kilowatt, that focuses the mind. When we're filling up at the petrol pumps, that focuses the mind. That's when it hits people in real life, in real situations. And if that doesn't focus how you change, then I don't think anything will really. It's that bottom line where it hits people in their pockets at a personal level. That's what really makes a difference.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, definitely.
You could do anything in that sense, and if you could do it with an environmental spin on it, they look fantastic.
But we live in a world as well when I've got my grandmother, she's 92, and when she was my age, most of her income would have gone on to buying food. Whereas now people have got Netflix, they've got Sky, they've got Amazon Prime, they've got phone bill. Like how we want to spend our money has completely changed. And as a country, food probably has got too cheap. We've been spoilt for choice. I think maybe as environmentalists, we should be focusing on pushing or encouraging people to eat seasonally, because that's what we did during the pandemic. People went back to their farm shops and they realised I could buy a sack of spuds and that's going to last me 3 weeks, and we can have a different meal every night. And like food banks and things like that should be having potatoes in and seasonal veg, because that's what is part of a healthy diet, and that it links to helping the environment, but it also links to our health. And also it helps your pocket at the end of the day. So it's a win-win for everybody. I'm very pleased that you brought up the argument of what we're spending our money on, because I have the exact same conversation with my wife a few weeks ago of what did our grandparents spend their money on, because food was a lot more it was a huge part of your wage packet essentially, was going on food and staying healthy and eating. Definitely.
So things have changed a bit,
and the world's a lot smaller now, isn't it? Because you can get anywhere, you can communicate with anybody. And I remember when my grandma used to ring her daughter in New Zealand, and she used to be scared of how long that conversation was going to be because it was costing her a fortune. Whereas now we can Zoom for free. Like, we live in a different world, don't we?
So what other things across the farm have you implemented, or what kind of practices are in place that are giving a more environmentally positive impact?
So we did the poultry site in 2019, December 2019 that opened, and I did that with the view of increasing our organic matter in our soils by having the poultry manure. But I never dreamt that fertiliser would double in price. So suddenly that value of that manure became increasingly valuable to us.
Bit of meg action there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And then we're getting incentivised now to test our soils, improve our organic matter. So that this all links together. And then it sends me on this journey of soil health. So I want to improve soil health. So we're doing less tillage. We're doing less intensive tillage. We don't grow oilseed rape anymore because it was getting too challenging and too high risk. So I grow maize for grain, which is really, it is a niche crop really, although maize is grown all over the country, not for the grain. So I don't mind doing things a bit outside my comfort zone, taking risks. We've invested heavily in machinery because it needs different machinery, but it's really exciting. We've got a market on our doorstep at Shep Shed with GLW feeds, and we grow maize for them, and it's working really well. It's doing wonders for our soils. So, yeah.
So is that why you mentioned oilseed rape? Is that why we're seeing less yellow fields this year?
Yeah. This year I think there's actually more yellow fields than there probably was the last couple of years.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely, rape's a real challenge. The seed dressing, the neonic seed dressing that was banned several years ago has made it very, very difficult to grow. It's not just the seed dressing. There's lots of issues with oilseed rape that we have to combat. We've probably grown it too often.
Yep.
So historically we were wheat rape because it was the most profitable rotation. Whereas now we're growing things like winter beans. They're not very profitable, but they're really good for our soil. And when we're planting wheat after beans, it's like, oh, this is lovely. The soil's in great condition. And you forget that you've just grown a crop that probably hasn't been the most profitable, but it's bringing a lot more to the rotation. It's not all about money in that essence anymore.
So you mentioned the crop selection that you're growing these days. So the UK isn't in the most climate affected region of the world currently, but things are changing. Is that something that you think about with your crop rotations?
Yeah, all the time. So maize that I've just touched on is it needs warm weather to grow, and like I say, there's a line across the country from Bristol to Norfolk, and they always say you can't grow maize above that line, not very well anyway. But that line's moving up all the time. We're getting warmer and warmer, and also we're getting extremes. It seems to be like we're breaking records all the time. Like the top 10 warmest summers have all been in a 2000 and something. So we obviously are in a climate that is getting warmer, and we can benefit from that, but it could be catastrophic for other parts of the world. Yeah.
Well, sticking to the topic of climate's been a different kind of way. The changes in the climate of the economies that you work in, that kind of thing, and the big shifts that we've had due to big global events, or slightly more localized events with Brexit, I suppose. But has things like Brexit and COVID impacted the way in which you work?
Yeah, Brexit, COVID, the war in Russia. I think they all interlink in ways that we can blame everything on those things. It's very easy to blame things on Brexit. I voted Remain personally, but that morning when we woke up and turned the telly on, you thought, right, that's what we voted now, let's move on and get on with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does create challenges, things with legislation which are really frustrating, things that we can't do much about. So for example, at the minute they're on about, we haven't got the legislation in place for parallel imports of chemistry that we use. And it's really frustrating because it's just there's no environmental link to these rules and regulations. It's just a legislation thing that some paperwork's not been done because probably Brexit and COVID has all been a smokescreen and stuff hasn't been going on that it should be. I don't know, but yeah, legislation and rule changes just for the sake of it is really frustrating when farmers, this field here, for example, I want the best for that field. I don't want to do anything that's going to do any harm to that field because I want that field. I've got a young daughter and I want her to be able to farm if she wants to. I want her to farm this field, and then I want her kids, or if I have other children, to farm this field, and I want it to be in the family for generations. So the image of farmers ruining the environment really doesn't sit well with me, really.
No. No. And they might not all be doing as much as you, but yeah, there's certainly different images of farmers that we potentially need to take with a pinch of salt or a pinch of corn. Who knows? So is there anything that's come out of those big events that has been useful from an environmental perspective? Or has it all been challenging?
I think it's very easy to look at all the negatives when people talk about Brexit, COVID. I mean, there were elements of COVID which was absolutely brilliant, like the roads were quieter.
Yeah, much
I felt
quieter.
like we went back 50 years, there were elements of it that I know it was a real tough time for everybody, but there were, as farmers, we were very privileged and lucky to be able to carry on working. I think maybe people's appreciation for farmers changed during COVID. Like I said, the people queuing at farm shops, realising actually where their food's come from, seeing supermarket shelves empty.
Well, you must have been a key worker, surely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And like now, I almost feel like a lot of that work's been undone. And I feel like, hypothetically, you could say, well, we need a pandemic now for people to realise where their food comes from. And we've just had that. And people are very short-sighted, I think. When I went at our local farm shop, they do a various array of meats and lamb and things like this, eggs, and they had a sign, and we went there one day and there was a huge queue during COVID, everyone's social distancing, wearing masks, and there was a sign and it said, please don't forget us when this is all up, when everything gets back to normal. And I'm sure they might have a 5% or a 10% increase on what their normal thing was, but generally a lot of them people have just gone back to the supermarkets because we're all convenience. We all do it. Like we all go to the supermarket and you get everything there. Tesco at Ashby, brilliant. You get it all.
And the supermarkets are even more convenient now because of COVID and the deliveries. And
definitely.
Changed. That's interesting. Well, I still get my milk from a local farm and my potatoes.
We get milk from a vending machine, and and we've got a glamping business, and we get all their milk from the vending machine. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, there you go. So let's we're not going to talk about pandemics and that kind of thing again, I don't think. So let's talk about skills and qualifications that you needed. Now, obviously, it's family business.
Yeah.
But you still need the right skills. You still need the training and that kind of thing to be especially environmentally proficient when it comes to being a farmer. What did your journey look like?
So when I came home in 2011, we employed an agronomist at the time, and he was what we call an independent agronomist. So he didn't work for a big company or anything. He was independent, and he decided to take the move to AIAgrM at the time, and he knew that because we were quite a small family business, we quite liked the independent side of things, that we wouldn't move with him to AIAgrM. So I took on the opportunity to do the qualifications required. So I did my basis, did my facts, I took on the agronomy of the whole farm. And a farmer doesn't need to do basis and facts, but they do need to have a basis and facts qualified person advising them. So I made the decision to do that myself. So then that creates savings. We were spending 12-15 grand a year on an agronomist, whereas now and I can use my time, utilise my evenings and things like that. So it works really well.
So talking about your CPD then, am I right in saying that you worked in New Zealand for a bit?
Yes, so as part of my placement year, I worked in Colchester on an onion farm, and they did a lot of packaging onions. So rather than pay us all winter to do wet day jobs, so to speak, they paid for three of us to go and work in New Zealand for 3 months. So we did an onion harvest over in New Zealand. Wow.
So they don't own a farm in New Zealand as well?
No, they've just got contacts out there, and it worked really well. So we sort of did harvest in England, and then we went over and did another harvest in New Zealand, and then we were back in time for planting in the spring. But so it worked really well. So
did that just essentially give you an extra bit of a chunk of time to learn in a bit of kind of downtime in the UK?
Yeah, different. It was a different environment. It was a steep learning curve going away from home and things like that. I grew up a lot in those few months, and placement is invaluable. It's especially on a family farm, to go and work for somebody else was really important. Yeah,
I can imagine so. And you, now picking up on other things you've said throughout our chat, you mentioned about the glamping side of things on the farm, which is something that came on board recently.
Yeah, 2020 we bought 151 acres, and that came with a glamping business.
Okay, and how does that fit into the the mix of the farm and your plans for the future, that kind of thing?
Really good, actually, because we've got a menagerie of animals. We get young kids come and we do 2 farm walks a week, and it gives us a chance to educate what I would call the future consumers.
Okay.
And their parents. A lot of them are from London, Manchester, big cities basically, and they it's not through any fault of their own, but they don't always necessarily know about things, and it's quite good for them to learn a bit about agriculture. And if they take one thing away and that might live in their memory for the rest of their life, then I feel like it's all worthwhile.
Yeah. So you do farm walks for the guests?
For the guests, yeah, just for the guests. So we have an honesty shop on site. They have the full glamping experience, and then on a Wednesday morning and a Saturday morning, they can come up and we do like pony petting. We can collect the eggs, we feed the animals, and talk about crops generally. And when you tell these people that you're a chartered environmentalist, the word chartered really hits home with them, and it sort of adds a bit of value, so they have faith in what I'm telling them, sort of thing, really.
So beyond being an environmentalist, having that chartered element is something that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's good for me to hear, that's for sure. And I guess, with doing farm walks with kids and that kind of thing, we hear a lot on the news and through our circles that the kids are the ones who know more about the environment than the adults. So they're able to then, upwards educate to the elder people in their family to make a bit of a difference. It's got to be good. Yeah,
and they're growing up with it. Like kids today, I mean, I'm not very old myself, but like kids today are growing up with like the thing now with bags for life, or just something simple like that. It's quite a new thing, really, and whereas like Ottilie, my daughter, she's going to grow up with bags for life, and whereas we were quite wasteful with our usage of plastic bags, weren't we? Like it was the sort of thing you'd see in the hedgerows and things like that. So that's another thing I'm really passionate about is with the environment is litter. Like
cleaning up your hedgerows.
Yeah. So I campaign with an NGO called Clean Up Britain, so we do a lot of work in trying to I do more from a farming point of view, it's more the fly tipping aspect, but generally just as a whole, you go to any other country in the world and it feels very clean, doesn't it? Whereas here it's definitely not clean. So changing that mentality of the guests that we have, those young, they appreciate the countryside that they live in or they're visiting. Hopefully it will make the countryside a better place in the long run.
Yeah, and I wonder if that kind of thing sticks out more for people who generally used to urban environments and they come to the countryside. As much as it might be nice to live on a massive farm, you also got a lot of hedges that catch a lot of litter, and that's might become quite apparent to people who are staying on your farm that there's litter here too, isn't that? That's odd. Yeah, some of that litter could well have come from urban environments. It might not have done, that's for sure, because it might fly tipping and rubbish gets blown everywhere, but it still might open people's eyes.
Definitely.
Interesting. The perspectives that I don't often think about. It's good. So, a slightly more straightforward question, possibly. What's your favourite part about being a farmer?
Just doing something different every day. I love the fact that with the seasons and with the variability we've got within our business, things change. You might be doing something such as reading the meters for the tenants one day, you're field walking the next, you've got the harvest to bring in, which is heavily dictated by the weather. But then at the same time, on a wet Wednesday afternoon, if I want to come home and see my daughter, I can. And it's that work-life balance is really changing, I think, from previous generations. It used to be very trendy, and the in thing was to work every hour under the sun. Whereas I think, hoping that's changing a little bit now.
Yeah. And the next question is about, do you think you make a difference? And I think, in terms of your farm, I think you know that you make a difference.
Yeah, I like to try,
which is good to know. But in terms of the wider farming community, whether it's locally or beyond that, do you feel like you're able to make a difference?
So I'm on an FU Crops board, so I feel like I'm representing my area of interest to the people that I speak to when I go on Crops board. So yeah, I would like to think I'm having an impact, but then also if I do articles in the press, people might take on board what I'm saying, or at least have an interest in what I'm saying, and whether they take that on board or not. Like I said to you earlier, I'll keep saying yes if people keep asking me to do stuff, because one day they'll stop asking me, and then that'll be
true. And you're quite happy to spread the word about what you do.
Yeah, I think so. and people might criticise things like the NFU or different organisations, but don't sit back and criticise it. Just get involved and because all the NFU is the people that represent it. So if you want to put your mark on things or have an impact, then get involved. That's what I say. Yeah.
Don't be a grumpy farmer.
Yeah, that's it.
Unbelievable.
Well, we've all got to be a little bit grumpy.
Yeah, it's part of the course.
Yeah.
So, talking about the groups and so on that you're a part of, is there such thing as whether it's local or what, a group of farmers who are particularly interested in aspects of environmental or sustainable farming? Is that a thing?
Yes. Yeah, I think generally any farmer that's in a discussion group or in a group, they're generally in the top 10%. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but they're definitely in the top 10%, and they're all interested in doing things for the environment generally. Yeah. I would say, and like I said, linking back to net zero, if we help the environment, it generally reduces our inputs as a whole, whether it's fuel use, fertilizer use, chemical usage. If we can bring that down, it's going to help our back pocket at the end of the day. True.
Yeah. There's got to be additional benefits to it, which is obviously incentivise people to change their habits. Going back to your Chartered Environmentalist registration, what does having that mean to you?
It gives you the confidence to deliver a message. I mean, we live in a world when there's lots of opinions out there, but if I have that behind me, it maybe gives my opinion a bit of value, maybe more value than some other people's opinion. And like I said, just the confidence to keep on learning, networking, meeting different people, especially in the environmentalist side of things. It's a different group of people I might see at an agricultural event, and maybe one day they will merge better, but at the minute there's quite a divide, I think.
So you'd be pretty keen on other agricultural professionals going down the route of Chartered Environmentalists, whether they're farmers or whether they're agronomists and that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think the industry's got to become more professional, and doing things like this, it opens doors into different contacts, meeting new people, linking agriculture with other aspects of environmental protection and things like that. And you don't know what opportunities it could bring to our business going forward and to other businesses. So I just think professionalising our industry is really important.
Yeah,
we're way behind other industries such as construction, things like that, and farmers are resistant to change, I guess. But I think my generation probably are open to change, and I think that's a good thing.
So do you think it gives that level of trust?
Yeah, definitely. So when you speak to people and if you say, I mean, I don't start a conversation with I'm a Chartered Environmentalist, but it's nice to be able to have that when you're giving advice, whether it's just within the business or to anyone, to have that behind you.
Yeah, so you wouldn't see other Chartered Environmentalists as rivals?
No, not at all. No, I think sharing knowledge and networking is extremely valuable.
Have you had many people asking you about it?
Yeah, I get a few messages. So I went to Oxford Farming Conference, which was, I got a bursary to go there this year, when there was about 16 of us, and quite a few of them have asked about it. Okay. I've got a guy who was linked to building our poultry sheds, and he's gone off with his own business, not directly linked to agriculture, but he's asked about it. So yes, there's definitely people asking.
Interesting. That's good to know. I've only got a couple of questions left. The first one I know a little bit about because of the white tent behind us, but what's next for you?
So we got married during COVID, 15 of us on a Wednesday afternoon, so we're celebrating it this weekend, and we're also getting our daughter christened. So it's a nice, hopefully a lovely weekend to celebrate our marriage, that even though we've been married for 2 years, and the christening of our daughter. So
the lack of rain recently is hopefully going to hold on.
Not a problem this weekend. Hopefully it can rain on Sunday.
It can rain on Sunday.
When everyone else is helping tidy up, it can rain.
This is true. But farming wise, what's next?
I'd love to do a Nuffield scholarship where you get a bursary to travel the world and look at different farming techniques. I'd really like to do that on break crops opportunities that climate change is going to bring to different break crops in the UK. Like we touched on earlier, maize is becoming more viable as a break crop, but maybe it can reach out to things like sunflowers and things like that. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to come for our industry going forward.
Okay. And you mentioned travel. Is that a potential in the future?
Yeah, hopefully. For enough field, you have to do about 10 weeks travelling in a year, which does bring its challenges, but everyone always says to me there's never really a good time to do it, so just crack on.
So a question linked to that, I suppose you run a lot of things on the farm, you have people working for you, you're able to leave the farm and leave them in charge?
Yeah, definitely, and I feel like leaving the farm and passing on responsibilities will only benefit the business further going forward. It means I can put my time elsewhere when I come back, hopefully.
Yeah. And if I suppose they've obviously worked elsewhere previously, so on different farms, have they had to adapt to an extent because of some of the environmental things or sustainability practices you have here?
Yeah, definitely. And having the chartership to your name and writing in the press and Farmers Weekly and things like that, it gives them the confidence to have faith in your ideas. Yeah. Doing things like direct drilling. Sometimes we try things and they don't always work, but we're learning all the time. We're doing cover crops, spring cropping, reducing our blackgrass levels. Our yields may be compromised sometimes, but our cost of productions are hugely improved. So there's lots of different things that we've got to take into account when we're farming now. It's not just put it in the ground and grow as good a crop as you can. It doesn't matter how much it costs, because it really does matter how much it costs now.
Well, from what I've seen, you certainly should be a role model, so that makes sense. Now, I do have one last question, I promise, which we ask all of our EnvCast guests. If you're able to influence world leaders for a day, what would you go for?
I would say to scale down the targets. I feel like net zero as a target is fairly broad. Measuring it in itself is quite difficult and proving quite a challenge. So bring baby steps, maybe just everyone becoming more efficient, encouraging people to become more efficient, and then net zero will be a byproduct of that, essentially.
So, thank you very much for joining us today, Will.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. It's a nice place to be, nice place to spend an afternoon. If you want to follow in Will's footsteps by becoming a Chartered Environmentalist and showcasing your environmental knowledge, if you go to the Institute of Agricultural Management website, which is IAgrM.com, IAgrM.com, we're going to put a direct link on to that particular, just to the CEnv page of their website underneath the podcast description for this particular podcast. Just click on that or tap on that. We don't actually have a speaker confirmed for next month yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be amazing, so don't miss that. We'll see you then. Thanks again, Will.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. To learn more about Society for the Environment's role in policy, please visit our Knowledge Hub for the latest policy resources and submissions.